one of the things that folks should know about all of your books is that they are very intimate, very personal. You talk about yourself, but you also speak in a way that most writers do not. You use second person pronouns. I mean, you speak directly to the reader. You say, you feel this way, you think this way. And a lot of people read that and say, I do think that way. This is a person who's speaking directly to me in a way that, mainstream political books very often do not. They consider me sort of a widget in whatever ideology they're pushing, or they're considering the value of systems or not systems. But you sort of end around that. And I think that in many ways, that's what members of the left find so threatening, is because if you're a member of the left and you believe that all individuals are essentially just the outgrowths of institutions, and therefore that all change by individuals is going to be insufficient, and that it must be societal change that creates individual change, you're a threat, because you're telling people, well, the systems can certainly get better, but the main threat to you is you. And that is a deeply threatening message to people. And if people find fulfillment in that message, then the left really does have a problem, because if people start improving their lives within the system and not blaming the system for their problems, and instead recognizing that they can improve their lives. That's what members of the left hate most of all. You talk about in the book, Jordan, the fact that people are constantly coming up to you and they're saying things like, I was leading a dissolute life. I read your book. I started taking your advice and I've turned it around and now I'm doing much better in life. And, I'm blessed to have much the same experience from a lot of people who listen to the show, people who have been homeless, who now have graduated Harvard Law School, people who were single moms and then decided to take a college course and figure out their lives, people who've made mistakes and turned their mistakes around. And to me, those are inspirational stories. I think that because those inspirational stories exist, that I think is why people find you to be such a threat. It's because so many people are inspired by the stuff that you say and change their life individually without putting all of their ire and focus on a system that the left is mainly focused on tearing down.
I defy anyone to go read 10,000 comments on my YouTube channels and not come away with a much better, with a much refreshed view of human nature. The comments are, in the main, unbelievably positive, and not in a naive sense. They're positive in a thoughtful sense and in a communal sense, because the people who are making comments on the lectures are also commenting on each other. And there's ideological babble on both sides. I would say that's probably 5% of the comments. And generally, I believe they're written by people who didn't actually watch the lecture, because they're often out of context. But in any case, 95% of the comments are thoughtful, but also extremely positive, which is very rare in a social media comment landscape, which tends to be very, very toxic. And so I think that's absolutely great. And it certainly has that impact on me when I read it. But then here's something else that I've observed in the media attacks that have been directed towards me. They're not just directed towards me. First, they're directed to who they think I am. So that's kind of interesting to begin with. But more than directed to me, and more perniciously, is that they're directed to those who are hypothetically following me. Now, I don't regard myself as someone with followers. I regard myself as someone with viewers, listeners, and readers. And that's different. But in any case, my typical follower, so goes the story, is a disaffected, angry, young white male. And for a while, I, in some sense, pushed back against that and said, well, my audience is about 70% male, but YouTube skews male, so that's perhaps part of the reason. And I see no evidence that it's particularly limited racially or ethnically, especially when I see my lecture crowds and when I meet people on the street. But then I started to realize that was the wrong response. The right response is, why does it disturb you so much that there's a group of people who, by your own admission, are disaffected and angry and alienated and young, and I'm helping them? And why is that exactly a problem? What is it that I'm supposed to be doing with them? Just out of curiosity. What do you think, if you had your druthers, would I ignore them? Would no one talk to them? Is that actually what you want? Well, the answer seems quite clear, that is exactly what's wanted. That's what's held forth, because there's this implicit assumption in all of this critique that in my very active aid, I'm doing something immoral enough to be parodied, let's say, as Red Skull. And so just what the hell's going on here? It's like, why is that now fodder for parody or slander? Precisely. I mean, do you debate the fact that I'm helping? Well, you go read the comments yourself and see what you think. And so then I thought about that a bunch too. I thought, well, what is it with men, the men that I'm speaking to, let's say, why are they responding positively? Why do they come to my lectures, the biblical lectures even, which is very surprising, right? Because what the hell are men doing at a biblical lecture, especially young men, especially when they could go do anything else and they have to pay for it? It's like, what are they doing coming to this lecture? Well, if the patriarchy is an evil tyranny, then the appropriate attitude towards any male ambition is to not treat it as ambition, but to treat it as nascent drive to tyrannical power, which is certainly what Foucault would recommend, for example, or Derrida, because it's all power. And so if you see some young man trying to stand up and better himself in any dimension, you're not going to trust that. You're going to identify that as the manifestation of tyrannical power. And clearly, if the patriarchy is a malevolent tyrant, then any sign of the desire to contribute it to it should be at minimum not encouraged, but more subtly criticized and discouraged at every possible opportunity. And that's our culture.